The Tennessee Volunteers used to play in these games. The Vols used to play in massive, big fall Saturdays when the nation watched and there was 100,000 people at Rocky Top, and it was one of the best atmospheres in college football. This used to be Tennessee. And because this is who Tennessee was in the 60s and the 70s and 80s under Johnny Majors and the 90s under Philip Fulmer, because this is what Tennessee was for years upon years, for decades, playing in Sugar Bowls and Cotton Bowls and Fiesta Bowls and Orange Bowls, competing for national championships, ranked in the top 10 of the top 5. The last 20 years have been particularly painful because it has just been about 20 years of tax slayer bowls and dysfunction. After Philip Fulmer was kind of nudged out after 5-7 in 2008, Lane Kiffin came in. That didn't last long. Then it was Derek Dooley, and that didn't last long. And then it was Butch Jones, where 7-6 was pretty good, kind of. And then it was Jeremy Pruitt, where 8-5 was really good, kind of. But you've got to go back to 2007 for the last time Tennessee finished the season ranked in the top 15. You've got to go back to 2001, the last time Tennessee won 11 games and ended the season ranked in the top 5. It's been 15 to 20 years since Tennessee played in games like this. Not games that were the 3:30 SEC on CBS window because the other team was good. The Tennessee played in a game like this because they were good. And so all of that was baked into Saturday's game. That it used to be a birthright. That the third Saturday in October against Alabama was a beautiful day and a big-time window and a big-time game, and that might decide the SEC, and that this historic rivalry was renewed every year, and Saturdays at Rocky Top meant something. And so forgive Tennessee fans, who I believe get a bad rap because they're incredibly emotional and they're incredibly ravenous, and they've watched the rest of the SEC kind of pass them by. They've seen Florida win national championships under Urban and Steve Spurrier. They've watched Georgia now win a national championship. They've seen Alabama kick their ass for 15 years. They've seen Auburn win national championships. They've seen LSU win national championships. They've seen Texas A&M develop into a financial power. They've watched Ole Miss have not one but 2 big runs under Hugh Freeze and now Lane Kiffin. They've seen a lot of smack. They've seen a lot of junk. And they're not part of the party. And they used to be. And so Saturday was awesome because it was a flashback to what they remember in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. And my goodness, did that game deliver.
40-yard attempt. Not quite in the middle of the field. When what there is at his back. McGrath to win the game against Alabama. Paxton Brooks to hold. Waiting for the snap. There it is. The kick on the way, and that kick is knuckling toward the upright, and it's good. Just gets over the upright. Chase McGrath wins the game for Tennessee.
I also told the players that we can accomplish every goal that we've had start at the beginning of the season. You know, there's no room for error in the West. We went out in the West, we can win the West, and, you know, still have a chance to go to the SEC championship game. So, but I think the key to the drill is you got to learn from these experiences. You got to learn from the mistakes that you made. You never improve if you can't learn from the mistakes that you make. So And obviously, we got a lot of work to do. I hope everybody, is all in on trying to do that work so that we can improve and, play better.
Saturday, and that was Tennessee Vols radio on Learfield. That was, of course, Nick Saban after the loss. Saturday was a turning point in the SEC. It was. No matter what happens from here on out, it was. It was because Tennessee lined up against one of the best in the country when all eyes were on them, when all of the attention was on them, when College Game Day was there, when there was 102,000 people in attendance, and they rose to the occasion. And they could lose out the rest of the way, which I don't think that they'll do, and it would suck. But for Saturday, it was a message that we belong and that we didn't puke on our shoes. We didn't mess this up. We delivered. And that's a turning point of a program. That when matched up against the barometer, the standard in the country, you lived up to the challenge. Hendon Hooker was brilliant. And that final drive takes some stones. That final drive, when instead of sitting on it, worried about a turnover, plan till overtime, to go, pedal to the metal, we're going downfield, we're trying to win this football game right now. Goes 45 yards in 20 seconds, 2 plays, to set up that 40-yard field goal. And the 40-yard field goal couldn't have been pretty. It couldn't have been end over end, split in the uprights. It had to be a knuckleball, a knuckle puck that just gets over the crossbar, because it had to be that way. It couldn't have been easy. But Hooker had the game of his life, and forever there's going to be 100,000 people or more that tell their kids and grandkids and neighbors and coworkers and cousins and uncles, etc., I was at that game. I was in the stadium when we tore down the goalpost and we threw it into the river and we streamed onto the field and we beat Bama. That was an incredible, incredible game. And I'm not always just about pure offense. I like a stop every once in a while as well. But this 52-49 was incredible. It was fantastic. It was scintillating. Because every time Tennessee tried to run away with this game, Bama just pulled them back. Pulled 28-10. Man, they can't stop them. Bama pulled it back. And then at the end of this game, when Bama has the lead, you're like, oh, my God, this is how Tennessee's going to lose. It was the Vols who answered, and on that final drive. This game had it all. Incredible finish, incredible emotion, incredible history, incredible performances, and a massive round of respect to Bryce Young. Because the only reason Bama has a lead in that game, the only reason Bama is in that game, the only reason Bama didn't lose by 3 touchdowns was because Bryce Young made plays nobody else in the country can make. Young's ability to dance in the pass rush, his ability to avoid a sure sack, a sure tackle behind the line of scrimmage, and create a play out of nowhere downfield was the only way Bama could stay in this game and overcome that deficit. He was spectacular. He was spectacular in that loss. That duel between Hooker and Bryce Young is one of the best duels you'll ever see in college football. But let me also say this. You just heard Nick Saban talk about everything still in front of us. That's true. They lost to an SEC East team in Tennessee, which means if they run the table of the SEC West and they've already beaten Texas A&M. If they beat the Mississippi States and the LSUs, the Ole Misses of the world, they'll go to the SEC championship game. They'll have won their side of the conference, and then everything's still in front of them. They'd get Georgia or Tennessee more than likely, and then you beat them and you go to a college football playoff. You might even get there without beating them. Probably a 2-loss Alabama team doesn't make a playoff. But Bama, here's why Saturday's a line of demarcation as well. Bama came off a super sloppy game last week in College Station, or last week, Tuscaloosa rather, against A&M. And you would have thought, well, Nick Saban has an entire week to hammer home into these guys' brains. You're not good enough. You played sloppy. You can't make those mistakes. You can't shoot yourselves in the foot. And that Bama would have played the cleanest game they could play. You would have thought coming off that game against A&M. And instead, it was more of the same. Bama has now played 3 sloppy games. It's camouflage because Bryce Young was so good. Sloppy against Texas, sloppy against Texas A&M, sloppy against Tennessee. Bama is not used to playing 1 sloppy game a season, let alone 3 in the first 2 months of the year. That's alarming. If there was a game you would assume you would get the best, cleanest Bama effort, it would be this one. Now, part of that is the Neyland Stadium crowd. You got 102,000 people screaming bloody murder at you, and it's hard to think. But a lot of unforced errors and a lot of mistakes, and Bama's going to have to clean that up. And I wonder if this is just not a very good Bama team, that they've got talent, but they're just not playing very well together. But that day on Saturday is coming off of Georgia beating Bama in the national championship game. And I wonder if that fourth quarter against Georgia in the title game might have been one of those moments where things flip. If you go back to the 1981 NFC Championship game and the catch between Joe Montana and Dwight Clark, at the time you couldn't have known that the Cowboys wouldn't make Super Bowls after that Tom Landry's doomsday defense and 70s dynasty had ended. You couldn't know that at the time. But when you look back in retrospect, you realize after that it was never the same. The Cowboys were good. They would get to NFC Championship games in the early 80s, but they would always lose. They wouldn't get back to a Super Bowl. Staubach had retired, and you're like, oh, when you look back on it, that was the day they say the dynasty died. You wonder if that fourth quarter, when it looked like Bama was going to do it again to Georgia, and that Bama would Bama and Georgia would Georgia, but then the Bulldogs found ways to win that national championship game, if that now was a new reality where newbies that always were tortured by Bama, they delivered their comeuppance. Georgia title game, Tennessee on Saturday. Let's see how Bama responds. They got 3-4 tough weeks in a row here. Nothing as tough as Tennessee, but the Vols winning that game and Bama losing that game certainly doesn't feel like the way we've seen the last 15 years in Tuscaloosa. Partying on Rocky Top.
Man, Rocky Top, this is college football at its absolute best. Man, our team competed 60 minutes. Like, these fans, phenomenal. What an environment, man.
Josh Heupel turned out to be an amazing hire. Who would have thought? Everyone figured he just kind of inherited Scott Frost's program at UCF. Just assumed that he was a friendly hire of Danny White, the AD. Just figured, once again, underwhelming hire. Tennessee and Vols fans weren't all that thrilled. And within a season and a half, he has changed Tennessee football.